Hi everyone, and welcome to this Talking Together event with the President of the IMechE, Terry Spall. This year, the IMechE, in collaboration with Royal Aeronautical Society and the IET, are producing a range of mental health and well-being contents to focus on this universal issue. We will be exploring three key themes today with Terry. They are dealing with uncertainty, dealing with disappointment, and dealing with loneliness. It's great to have an engineer and a leader of the engineering profession here with us. And we're really looking forward to Terry's perspective on this key issue of mental health and well-being. This event is being hosted by myself, Rafsan Chaudhry, and Gloria Adebayo.
Thank you, Rafsan. Like Rafsan said, we are really looking forward to this conversation as it's such an important conversation to have. So thank you so much to you, Terry, for joining us today, giving the time to be here and answer the questions that we've got for you. So we're going to start by allowing Terry to introduce himself, and then we'll answer some questions that members of the IMechE have sent in.
Okay. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Rafsan, as well. It's great to be with you today. I am the 135th president of the IMechE. So our very first one, of course, was George Stephenson many, many years ago, and he gave the world the locomotive. I've got no claim to fame whatsoever like that, but I spent 40 years in the automotive industry and had a really good time doing that. And that's what's led me to my presidency, really. So I've been involved with the institution along the way from graduation, really. I graduated in 1985 and I got involved then, and I've been involved ever since. And that's involved now with 7 years on the trustee board as well. So it's a good thing. I've enjoyed it, or else I wouldn't have done it. But when you get to the role of president, especially in a year when we've got COVID to deal with as well, it becomes quite a challenge, I have to say. But anyway, I'm enjoying it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So our first question to you is, how would you describe your mental health, and what particular things do you do to sort of manage it?
Okay. I suppose I've got to be honest and open, really, haven't I? So there's no point in doing it. So I will be honest and open with you. I mean, I think at the moment, a little fraught, mainly because of the COVID lockdown, and the pressures of perhaps being president. But I would say I'm resilient enough to say it's under control and it's manageable, so I will get through it, and I always believe I will. But I think I've certainly found the second lockdown a little bit tougher than the first one from a mental health perspective, because you know what you're going to get into. I'm 58 now, so I'm conscious that I need to be sensible. I can't be running around and picking up the bug if I can avoid it, because it will have complications almost certainly. So I've been staying at home as much as possible, and I think that's okay. It's good. It's great to work from home for a little bit, but when you've done it we've all done it now for almost a year, I guess. It gets a bit tedious after a while. You probably heard the term Groundhog Day, and I think a lot of it is true. Every day becomes very much like the previous day, and I think you've got to find ways to break that sort of that routine, that simple routine with things that give you a little bit more freedom, and you just miss the interactions with people, I think, really, and that does affect people. It certainly affects me, and I think it will affect a lot of other people as well. And the presidential role, I mean, on one hand, it is absolutely a great honour. It's a career highlight for anybody, I think, really, to be the president of the IMechE. And I feel privileged to have got to that particular position. But when you look at it, it's a new job. So you're moving into a new job. I left my other job to do this job. It's quite funny when you think, okay, I'm going to leave a job behind that I get paid for to do a job that I don't get paid for. But you do it really because of the honour of doing it. But like all new jobs, it comes with that little bit of stress because you're going into the unknown and things like that. So it has its challenges. And I think the confidence for me is the fact that you've got a whole career behind you to pull on for that experience to help you to cope with these things. And if you have to want to do it. If you don't want to do it, then for goodness sake, don't go there. But if you have that drive and you want to do it, then it's a good experience. But it has its moments when it's tough, and I think you'll go through a whole range of emotions that perhaps you might not have experienced before. So it's not straightforward, and it has its challenges. So you accept that, but it's the right thing to do for me anyway.
Yeah.
So my approach, I suppose, really is it's all about planning and preparing. I think I'm one of these people that if I know I'm ready for something, I'll have confidence and I'll get on and do it, and I won't be anxious. I won't even think about it again. But if you go into something you're not ready for it, not prepared for it, then you put yourself in a position where you're going to be stressed. You're going to get anxious because you know you're not quite there, not quite ready. And I think, you know, that affects people's mental health. If you can avoid that by just getting yourself ready, I think that's a really good thing. And that's certainly what I do. And that means I might get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get ready for something. You know, I can do that. I'm a lark as opposed to an owl, so I can jump up in the morning and be ready for work and get on with it. But doing that for me is my sort of safety blanket, because it means I can get ready for these sort of tough things that I might do during the day and be ready, because I know I'm prepared. I know I'm ready for it. No matter what happens, I'll be fine, because I've actually read what I need to read. I've thought about it, and I've formed my own points of view and things like that. So I think they're the things that really matter.
Yeah, it's that like preparation aspect that sort of keeps you going.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot about in the hard times, just getting away and like reevaluating and thinking so that you can like tackle the next day. Do you have any hobbies that you do to sort of get away from the work environment, or anything that you might have picked up during lockdown just to take your mind off things?
Yes, I do actually. I mean, it's a very good point now, because I think, you know, when you think about work-life balance, and I'm looking at my role as president as work in this context, you know, you have to have a good work-life balance. So you have to be able to recognize that the two things are different. So you have to switch off from one and switch on to the other. And I think if you can't do that, you're gonna really struggle, and you might even have mental health problems because of that if you can't switch off. So you have to be able to switch off. And for me, I do all sorts of things. I like to climb mountains. I mean, that's my main passion. So I'll go all over the place climbing mountains. I love building and DIY projects. I've got all sorts underway at the moment. I love bricklaying, would you believe? So I can build walls and stuff like that. And I love to restore classic cars and sports cars. So I've got all that to sort of fall back on. And I can just completely switch off and then focus on that for the weekend, or whenever it might be, for a week's holiday or something. Go away and do something like that. And then when you've sort of regenerated, you've been away from the day job for a little while, and you come back, you're just so much fresher, so much more able to, you know, to tackle whatever lies ahead. I think, you know, if you can really master that art of being able to say, right, stop, I'm not in work, I'm in my sort of leisure time, and I'm going to do this, and really focus on that, then I think that's a really positive way to approach things.
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. It was really good what you said about waking up at 4 a.m. because for the last year or so, I've been trying to wake up at 4, and I fail every single time. So it's really cool to hear that you actually managed to wake up at 4 a.m. and get through with your hobbies and your day. So in terms of the key 3 themes that we were talking about, the first one is disappointment. And one of the questions we had was, what is the biggest disappointment you faced in your own career? And how did you deal with it? Because this year, a lot of young engineers have lost their summer internship or graduate placements, and which is very disappointing for them. So what kind of advice would you have for them on how to deal with this disappointment?
Okay. I think from a career perspective, I would probably, rather than say one big disappointment, I'd say there's a number of kind of medium level disappointments I've had to cope with along the way. I got made redundant when I worked for a company called Leyland DAF Trucks many years ago, you know, and I've just relocated with them to a new part of the country. So I had a real sort of mess on my hands then, and that was incredibly disappointing. But it wasn't necessarily my fault or the company's fault. They had financial difficulties, and they had to lose people, as often happens in a situation. But you know, that was one of the disappointments. I would say perhaps the second one for me was missing out on my first directorship for a company called Myra that I worked for. I'd really, really, really wanted to get this job and did everything. I worked really hard on just trying to win it, and I probably came in second, or close second, I hope. But I didn't win it, and I was ever so disappointed. You know, but even just looking at those 2 things, I mean, the first one for me turned out to be a very pivotal point in my career. Because I was made redundant, it forced me to do something else. Right, and that doing something else led me to a career that's taken me all over the world, literally all over the world. I've spent 10 years head of international. I set up businesses in China, India, Korea, Turkey, Brazil, Japan, literally all over the world. I'd never have done that if I hadn't been made redundant.
Right, yeah.
But at the time, it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. But you know, you got to think ahead as to what it might be. And the second one, it really did hurt. at the time because I wanted that job and I knew I could do it and I really wanted it, but I didn't get it. And I have to say, you know, the guy that did get it, he was a very worthy candidate, and I would say he was probably better than me at doing that, you know. So I took my hat off to him and said, yeah, you've done a really good job. 6 months down the line, he'd done a really good job and he's doing really well. But also in that 6-month period, I got promoted anyway to director.
Right.
So by going through that recruitment process, I think I'd shown my worth to the company that I could do this. And then they gave me a role anyway. So I became commercial director within 6 months of missing out on that interview. So these things have a way of self-rising, I think, really. But, you know, disappointments come along. And I think if you can be a little bit of an optimist, a little bit more half full than half empty, and you can accept the fact that as time goes on, your perception will change of that particular disappointment, then I think it helps you to cope with it. Because yes, bad things happen and you can't necessarily influence it. It just happens, right? Mm-hmm. But what you can control is what happens next and where you go from there. And then when you look back on it later, and you should always look back on things, I think, and learn from your experiences. I think you can say hand on heart that actually they're not necessarily all negative. You know, it was something that happened. It was a bit unpleasant at the time, but it's led you to something else, which is actually much better.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that you mentioned the humility aspect, that when you didn't get your second role, you put your hand up and said, okay, the second person was more deserving. So it's just to acknowledge that, sometimes we have to be disappointed.
Yeah, you play to win, though. You always play to win.
Yeah, of course. And so, talking of the sort of redundancies, the airline industry right now is in a very difficult situation, as are many other industries. And there's been a lot of furloughing going on, and there might be more furloughing in the future as well. And this creates a very uncertain time right now for everyone, whether they will have a job come the next month or so. So what kind of advice would you have for people who are dealing with this uncertainty right now?
All right. I think first and foremost, you've got to look at it as the fact it's not necessarily your fault. It's something that's happening, but it's not because you're not good at your job or anything like that. It's just a fact of life that the economics of the situation means that has to happen. You know, and I would say it's deeply frustrating. You know, for people who are in that situation. I've spoken to many. Some take it better than others, but equally, even the ones who take it best, it's really frustrating because they don't want to do it. They'd rather be working. Yeah, and I'm really sorry, really, for those people who have been furloughed, and worse still, for those who've been made redundant. I know a lot of people as well who've lost their jobs at this particular point in time. But my answer to this, really, I think my answer to the previous question probably laps over into this one in the sense that, there's always a positive in there, and you've got to find the positive. So if you can use your time wisely, so if you are furloughed, or if you are made redundant, if you can not just sit back and think, oh God, what's going to happen next, but if you can really think what you're going to do with that time that you didn't know you had, you've now got that time at your disposal. Adopt the mindset that you can go out there, you can do something really useful. You could start to learn a new language. You could go volunteering. You can volunteer for the IMechE even. Who knows? But you could do all these positive things that, although it looks like you're kind of, it's idle time on your CV, you could very quickly turn that around. That it's not idle time. Actually, you've used it really well. So, and hopefully in a few years' time, when you look back on these events, you'll do so, and you'll think it's positive because it might, if you got maybe done, it might well be that it forced you to change jobs for something that ultimately played out much better for you. So you've got to be half full and look at the positives and not get bogged down in the fact that it's just happened, that it's terrible. It's all those things, but it's life as well. And we have to face up to it. But look for the positives and move on.
It's the mentality shift, right? Just seeing it from a different perspective. Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. So you mentioned in that answer that do something else. So on that note, some people during these last few months sort of felt like, or questioning if they want to be in the STEM industry, for example, or if they want to be an engineer. So have you ever felt like you don't want to be in STEM anymore? You want to try something else? Maybe become a professional mountain climber or something?
Sounds very tempting. I have to say, I think I've always been an engineer. Right. So it's probably a more difficult question for me to answer. And I think it's fair. I mean, it's quite strange because a lot of people in my family are engineers as well. My father was an engineer. My brother was an engineer. One of my children is an engineer. My nephew is an engineer. Mostly mechanical as well. Maybe it's genetic, I don't know. Maybe it's in your DNA, I don't know, but maybe there's an engineering DNA. But the thing to consider is that I think, within engineering or even the wider STEM industries, you can have very diverse roles. So, you shouldn't look at it as pure hands-on technical mechanical engineering. It can be technical, it can be managerial, it can be commercial. You can have board positions, you can have roles involved with, there's a whole scope of things that you can do within STEM industries, within an engineering company. And I accept that it might not be for everybody. So it may well be you want to be a mountain guide, I don't know. But I've had an amazing time really doing some really fun things. The last company I worked at, we had fantastic test tracks and things like that. So I was always driving high performance cars around the test tracks, and I was traveling around the world with them, doing all these great things. The company was bought out by a Japanese company called Hariba, and their company motto is joy and fun. Right, so, and that was the parent company. And when you I said, well, what's all this about? How can you work for a company and the motto is joy and fun? You're here to work, aren't you? And what their mentality was, and this is a Japanese thing, was that really you spend most of your waking hours at work. So you're either asleep or you're at work, and there's a little bit in between, which is like your social life, where you can go off and do fun things. So on that basis, you want your work life to be as fun as possible. If it's not, then you're not going to do your best. You're not going to really shine and put the extra mile in and all the rest of it. You have to get to a situation where you do something that you really, really enjoy doing. And I think if you can do that, then you certainly achieve the Hariba mantra of joy and fun. And it's quite, it does work. I think it does work. If you can pick that job that works for you, whether it's in the STEM industry or not, it's just looking at you as an individual and what things you like to do, and just looking for those opportunities. And you might not know what they are when you walk into the company.
Yeah.
But you move around. I've moved around. You move around companies. You move around jobs. You might move around industries even. But you've got to find those things out there that really appeal to you and make it fun for you.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Terry. I just have one more question. Was the joy and fun in English or in Japanese? And do you know the Japanese term for joy and fun?
Do you know what? I do know it. Okay. I should have prepared on that one, shouldn't I? I've forgotten it now, but I do know it actually. And I used to, when I was doing presentations to our customers, I'd always finish by saying that at the end of it. And they always say, right, okay. Yeah.
Okay, it might come back.
Oh, that's great. It sounds like you've been continuously surrounded by communities of individuals that have sort of kept you going. But I suppose my next question to you is just, has there ever been a time where you felt lonely, and sort of what did you do to overcome that loneliness? Okay,
that's a good question. And I think if I said I wasn't never lonely, I'd be lying, because I think, you do have times. Certainly had times when I felt quite lonely. In fact, if I could talk about being president, I think being president has its moments when you feel quite lonely. If you're in the top job, and it's probably the same for any top job really, that people expect you to behave in a certain way, and they expect you to always be a charismatic leader they'd like to see in that particular role. But sometimes you don't feel like being that way on that particular day, or recognizing the fact that to get to that role you probably lost some of the comradeship that you'd have had in the middle ranks or the lower ranks, where you'd have people you could bounce off. You could have, you kind of lose that a little bit, and that's the price you pay. But if you want to have that leadership role, then you have to accept that. But there are times when you're on your own, and you think, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And you do generally feel quite lonely, And I've had it in my day job previously. I spent a lot of time overseas. I was always traveling the world for 10 years, continually traveling the world. I have 100 stamps in my passport to China and places like that. But that means then that you're away from your family, you're away from your colleagues. You sat on a plane, you're in a hotel, and I'd say that was even more intense in terms of feeling lonely. When you're in a foreign country, you might feel a little bit unwell one day. It just compounds that feeling that you're on your own. And you've got to. I think you've got to expect it and anticipate it. And once you know what's going to happen, you can sort of plan around it, because you can plan phone calls with people. or Skype sessions with people, and then kind of lift you up a little bit and, you know, break the monotony a little bit. But yeah, I've had times when I felt really lonely, and yeah, I think it's not, you know, everybody should expect that, and I think you need to find your own little way really to anticipate it, and try and plan around it. Plan things that will break you just sitting in a hotel room or sitting on your own in an office or whatever it might be, and just you know, absorbing the loneliness feeling, because there's ways out of it, I think.
Yeah. Just sort of finding that way that you personally adapt to these situations to sort of get you through them. People from like minority, ethnic and like traditional backgrounds, being like a minority in engineering, would typically go through these feelings of loneliness. So what would you say that the IMechE and employers can do to make the work environment and the institute itself just feel more welcoming and less lonely altogether?
Yeah, I think I can really understand that. My view would be a lot comes down to the culture of the organisation and the leadership style that you see in the organisation, because, you know, the leaders can be very influential and they can set the tone for the whole organisation, and each organisation will have its own culture, and that will, embedded in that will be a level of tolerance for things like ethnicity and things like that. And I've always firmly believed that, you know, it's the person inside that matters, you know, and I'd like to think I have an inclusive style of leadership. You know, I've always really tried to have that sort of style. And I think it's what makes organizations successful. Organizations are people. So if you can manage that resource really well, and you can see the potential in the person and not be distracted by the wrapper, be it ethnicity or gender or whatever segmentation you wish to consider, you know, and you can endear yourself to people, you can motivate people, you can help them never feel isolated or undervalued or lonely. You know, you can have a much more successful operation. But my view is a lot of it comes down to the culture and the leadership style.
Combined with sort of like feelings of loneliness and stuff, people at times will feel that uncertainty due to like imposter syndrome, especially just the idea that self-doubt can always creep in at any stage, like whether you're at the early stage of your career or like right up to president level. So especially to the young engineers, what advice would you give to them to sort of deal with that imposter syndrome?
Okay. I would say believe in yourself. Right? That's first and foremost. Believe in yourself, be confident in yourself. And there are many things you can do to give yourself that confidence. So I mentioned earlier on about preparing for things, you know, it works every day for me. If you get ready and prepare for something, you anticipate what's going to happen and you've prepared for that situation, you are so much more confident as you walk into that meeting or into that room, you know, and you can motivate yourself by being driven. You know, I am driven as an individual. I think that's a characteristic of a person. Some are driven more than others. I am driven, but I'm also tempered by being realistic. So not setting yourself goals you can't achieve and then you're disappointed because you've not achieved them. Set yourself realistic goals that you can achieve, you know, and you know, try and convert that sort of negativity, that negative feeling you get into positivity and a positive feeling by, you know, working out what's going to make that transition in that particular situation. How can you get from that situation to that situation? And there are ways to do it. You know, there are two clear mindsets there. You can choose, I think, which way you want to approach it. You can say it's going to be terrible. I'm going to hate it. You know, you can go in and you can say, do you know what? I'm going to smash this. I'm really going to deliver this, and just set yourself up in a positive mind. And I think so. If you can do that, and you're ready for something, you've prepared properly, then you can achieve anything. In my view, you can excel, and when you do excel, then you can sit back and think, okay, 5 minutes of enjoyment for myself now, because we've achieved that little goal today, and we're going to move on. So that's kind of what I would say to people, really.
Terry, did you ever sort of feel that imposter syndrome, especially in this sort of presidency role, where in a given day you might be thinking to yourself, why me, or I shouldn't be here? Because that's something that I feel a lot, especially in my current role in the company and with the IMechE as well.
Yeah, there are some really good examples of this that have hit me right in the face this year, and unfortunately, they are confidential in nature, so I can't get into the details with you. But yeah, I've faced some really tough ones this year that have taken me completely out of my comfort zone, beyond my position of knowledge into things that I've just had to deal with, and I've had to take counsel from other people and talk to them, try and understand their perspectives on those situations, and then form a view, and then in my situation, although I'm the president, I have to lead the trustee board. The trustee board makes decisions, not me, right? So I'm 1/12 of that decision-making capacity. So as president, you have to lead the trustee board and try and ensure that they're properly informed, and you can try and get them to a position where we can make those really tough decisions sometimes. And some of the circumstances we've had this year have been exceptionally tough, and it's really, in a way, although it's tough, it probably brings out the best in people as well. But when you're in that situation, you've got to deal with something you don't want to deal with, and you have to rely on other people. You don't have a choice. You have to rely on other people. You have to work with other people. You have to convince them of certain things to get decisions done. You've got to really work at something. It's tough. It is tough, but you can get there, I think, if you persevere.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the only way to grow, right? When you're uncomfortable, that's the only way you can learn new things and actually grow as an individual. Yeah. So we've spoken a lot about our own personal mental health journey, but in your career, have you ever had to counsel someone else on their own mental health, or if they're facing any difficulty? And if so, then what did you do? And any advice for any future managers or leaders on how to deal with their team members facing mental health difficulty?
Yeah, okay. I suppose I should start answering that with a little qualifier that I'm not a mental health expert by any means. I'm just an engineer. But I've been a mentor for many people through my career, and I'm still a mentor even today for some people. And I can think of a few situations where people have really displayed symptoms that are related to mental health. I won't name any names, but I'll explain the sort of circumstances. I mean, one was somebody going through professional registration, and she was finding it tough, I think, really, to present herself, to have the confidence to be interviewed or present or things like that. And we were trying to go through all these little exercises just to try and get her used to standing in front of people and handling situations. And we struggled for a bit, and then I said, okay, well, look, I'll years ago, you could take your mentor to a PRI interview. These days, it's frowned upon. You can't do that. But I went and I sat outside the room, and she went in, and she broke down in tears in the room. And it was purely we'd been through the situation, but the situation didn't quite play out, and our emotions got on top of her. And she came out, she sat down for a bit, and she settled down, and we just kind of said, well, look, you can do this. You don't need me to tell you can do it. You can do it. She went back in and she got it. She went through it and she got it. And it was just that little bit of a nudge, a little bit of a push to say, go on, you can do it. Just go and do it. I can think of another situation where this was actually in China a few years ago. We were presenting at a big conference, and in China they have really big conferences. There was probably 1,000 people in the audience, and one of the guys who was presenting, he was really, really confident on the plane going out and got out there, and then he lost his bottle completely. He just couldn't cope with it, and he just went into his inner shelf, and he thought, oh my goodness, what we're going to do, because he was a very good technical engineer presenting on a very complex subject, and none of us could cover for him. We couldn't do that. He had to do it. And we said to him, look, what's the problem? He said, I just can't do it. I can't face standing up in front of all those people and delivering that speech. And I said, well, look, what's the problem? So we went down to the venue during the night, about 10 o'clock at night, and they let us in. We went into the room and we stood on the podium, and we stood looking at this place. I said, what are you worried about? There's 1,000 seats out there, isn't it? What are you going to look at when you do your presentation? He said, well, I'll be looking at them. I said, I'll tell you what, don't look at them. So look at the wall behind them if you want, but don't focus on them at all. And you just focus on what's going on. and he was sick in the morning. He was that bad with it. And this is how stress can really get on top of you. He really just couldn't say, come on, we've just got to get through this. We've got to do it. You can do it. I know you can do it. All I've got to do is get to the podium. And all you've got to do is, for the first bit of it, ignore the audience and start talking. And you know what? He did it. He got up there and he did it. And he was brilliant. And I think as he walked out to that auditorium, he was probably 3 inches taller than when he walked into it. You know, and he's now the company he works for now. He's one of their top sort of biz dev guys presenting to the world. You know, but that's just that one thing that made the difference. That just gave him that confidence. And once he knew he could do it, he could do it.
Yeah.
So I think mentoring is all about. It's about people. It's about understanding what the anxiety is, and just giving them that little bit of extra confidence and taking some of the fears away. And I think for big presentations, I think if you can stand where you're going to present and just go there and get a feel for it, and you think, okay, yeah, that's fine. I know exactly what I'm going to do. You don't worry about it, quite the same. But you've got to prepare. I said that before. You've got to prepare. You've got to be ready for it.
It's that self-belief, right, that you can do it and just doing it once.
I think self-belief is everything, really. And, you know, preparation gives you that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So you've spoken very candidly about, you know, the 2 times you faced disappointment. And have you ever sort of had to sort of think about taking a break from your career because of your mental health? Or if not, have you always been very optimistic and thought you can fight through it all the time?
Yeah, I'd say I can answer that in a fairly concise manner because I haven't really. I've never wanted to take. I've always been fortunate to do things I enjoy. I think if you're doing something you enjoy, that thought doesn't really go through your mind. I think if you're struggling with something, then yes, maybe a break's good. But if you really, really enjoy what you're doing, then it rarely passes through your mind, and I think you just get on and do it. The years tick by very quickly. Trust me.
Yeah. Okay. And how has your sort of attitude towards mental health changed since you first started your career and to now when you're the president?
Okay. Well, I started my career in the late 1970s as an apprentice. And I would say then that the subject of mental health was very taboo. You'd never admit to anybody you had a problem. You know, and I think you just accepted that was the norm and you never challenged it. I certainly never challenged it. And if somebody was having mental problems, you looked at it in the wrong way. You looked at it as if they'd gone completely loopy. In actual fact, it might have been a situation that created it. They're completely normal people. And, you know, you just didn't look at it in the right way. I suppose looking at where I am now, you know, after 4 decades in the automotive industry, I think I recognise very clearly the importance of good mental health. You know, if you can have good mental health, you can have people who can be really productive and really help to drive an organisation. You know, and I think I also probably recognise the importance of the impact that it can have on people when it goes wrong, when things do go wrong. I've seen people, you know, collapse into tears and worse. You know, and when you analyse it and you look at what led up to it, sometimes these things are completely avoidable. It's just that it wasn't recognised. You know, they got into that situation, and with the right sort of mentoring, the right sort of people around them, it could have been avoided. I'm not saying every situation can be avoided, but certainly, you know, I think some can. I think in many ways, you know, in my years as a leader, I think I've probably become an agony aunt more than anything else. You know, to sit and listen to people and listen to their problems, and you know, you can't help everybody all the time, but you know, often if you listen to somebody. You know, and I think it's more about empathy than sympathy. You know, if you can empathise with them, you can get to their level and understand what they're going through. You know, and that's probably the start of the road to a successful outcome, I think. Really.
So, as like a leading institute, what could the IMechE do specifically to sort of positively influence like good mental health within like all the members who have got different perspectives on it, and just sort of bridge the gap between like, people who've grown up in the 1970s to people who've grown up in like the 2000s?
Yeah. Well, I would say certainly more of what you're doing now as a group, as a young member group. You know, the raising awareness with people is paramount. We have to do that. I think at the top level of the institution, you know, we need to we need to develop the culture of the institution to be, to be fitting for the next generation, really, to get it right, because, generations change, and what they need, what makes them tick, changes as well. I think as an organisation, we have to be progressive and we have to keep moving. So we're doing some work now looking at the culture of the organisation. And also, I think, the behaviours of people. So what, when people walk into the institution, how they interact with each other, how members interact with members, how members interact with the staff. It's driven by their own behaviours. And I think that is such an important area. If we can get that right, it'll be a really happy place for everybody and people will want to engage with the institution. If it's wrong, if it doesn't work, or people behave badly, then it's not going to be a good experience and people will distance themselves from it. So, we have to get the foundations right, and we have to get the culture right, and we have to get people to accept what we expect of them in terms of their behaviour towards the other people in the institution. So I think they're the really important things, to be honest.
Yeah, it's all about setting the precedent so people know what they're following in line to, and to keep that going throughout the institution. So we always leave this question for last, and that question is, what is your go-to comfort food?
I can see why you leave it till last. Okay. Well, you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from the south or even the Midlands where I live now. I'm actually from the north of England, from a town called Wigan. And what we get world famous for in Wigan is eating pies. Right, so that's my comfort food, would be a nice pie.
Okay. Any pie?
Probably meat and potato, which is the classic Wigan pie. But you can't eat too many, it's just not healthy if you eat too many.
Okay, so thank you so much, Terry, for your time. This has honestly been so sort of informative, and it's just been a really excellent conversation. It's great to have someone who's a senior leader in the IMechE having these conversations, because it enables us to see that the landscape really is changing, and that progress really is being made. So yeah, thank you so much, because it's enabling us to sort of break down the barriers and the challenges that we're sort of facing with mental health and well-being.
To be honest, it's great to be invited along. It's the first time I've ever been invited along to speak on a subject like this. And I think it's just so it's refreshing, really, to do it, because, I had to think. You made me think with these questions to work out, what do I think about these things? What is the driving force? And, when you do stop and you think, you realise, that these things are important. So I'd like to thank you all, really, for the work that you're doing. I've seen many of the things you've produced already. They're really good, really, really good. So I wish you continuing success, and thank you for inviting me along today.
Yeah, no, thank you, Terry, for some insightful answers to these questions. And like Gloria said, we need to start having this conversation and keep this going forward. So we will continue to grow this Talking Together webinar series. So in 2021, hopefully we'll get more leaders like yourself from different industries to give us their insight into mental health and well-being, and maybe have some live events as well. So I think you can tell that we do genuinely feel that this is a very important topic, and we should have the right tools and culture around us to have these open discussions with people that we look up to and people we aspire to be. So yeah, please everyone, take care of each other and look out for each other and continue having these conversations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also make sure to just view all the support and links that we've put out for where you can find out more information about this, and sort of where to sort of get support if that is what you need right now, or if somebody else around you needs it. But yeah, thank you to everyone who's watched this Talking Together episode. Make sure you take care.